My name is Dr. Ian Storch. I'm a board-certified gastroenterologist and osteopathic physician, and you are listening to DO or Do Not. If you are interested in joining our team or have suggestions or comments, please contact us at doordonotpodcast.com. Share our link with your friends and like us on Apple Podcasts, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Hi, I'm Tiffany Carlson, a second-year osteopathic medical student hailing from the Midwest, and you're listening to DO or Do Not. On this edition of DO or Do Not, we interview Dr. Melanie Jessen. Dr. Jessen is the Family Practice Residency Director at West Suburban Medical Center in Oak Park, Illinois. Dr. Jessen serves as the second-year Osteopathic Manipulative Medicine course director at the Chicago College of Osteopathic Medicine. She graduated from the University of Illinois at Champaign, Urbana, and subsequently attended the Chicago College of Osteopathic Medicine, where she also completed her internship, a neurology residency, and family practice residency. Dr. Jessen has served as the president of the Illinois Osteopathic Medical Society and was the delegate for the American Osteopathic Association. I hope you enjoy her journey starting as a teacher of dance and music and ultimately pivoting direction to attend medical school and become an osteopathic physician. Thanks for listening. Hi, Dr. Jessen. Hope you're doing well. Thank you so much for joining us on the DO or Do Not podcast.
Thank you for inviting me.
So we usually like to start with, what does your normal day look like, if there is such a thing as a normal day, just so our listeners can kind of understand how you spend your day as a physician. So just, start in the morning when you wake up and then just go through a typical day or a non-typical day of what your, work roles are and responsibilities are throughout the day.
Wow. Okay. Well, each day is different, but that's what I think makes it interesting. So, for example, on a Monday, I divide my time into seeing patients in the clinic for a half a day. And then my afternoon, what I do is I precept or I oversee my residents in clinic. And so that's teaching. So a lot of my week, I would say, is divided into having a half day of seeing patients and then a half day of teaching. I also teach on Wednesdays over at Midwestern University. I teach osteopathic manipulation over here. I'm sitting here today. So that's kind of how my week goes.
And so thank you so much for taking the noon hour to speak with us. Can you just share with our listeners kind of when you became interested in medicine and what made you decide to become an osteopathic physician?
So I came into osteopathic medicine in a very roundabout way. I was actually a musician before I was a physician. So I majored in music and minored in dance in college. So I was out doing both of those, and I was teaching. I got very interested in music therapy and dance therapy. And I was going back to school actually to study those, which you have to take your basic science classes. So I was taking my basic science classes, and then I learned about osteopathic medicine. And I was hooked. I was like, yes, this is exactly what I want to do, because I was very interested in movement and the musculoskeletal system, but also just in the social emotional aspects of people. And I really enjoyed working one-on-one with people. So I looked into osteopathic medicine and went to school.
And so where did you do your undergraduate education? And then you mentioned that you were a dancer and a musician. You're actually the second dancer that I've interviewed for this program. So I find that quite interesting and neat. So where did you go to undergraduate school? And then I know that you mentioned that you were working as a musician and then thinking about musical therapy, but were there any experiences during your undergraduate that kind of had you leaning towards medicine?
So I went to University of Illinois in Urbana, and I majored in music and minored in dance there. So they have wonderful departments for both of them. At that time, I can honestly say I had no interest in going into medical school. That was not my life plan at the time. So it really was something that evolved as I was out after college. I was teaching at a music studio. I was teaching piano. And then I was also a piano accompanist So I was a piano accompanist downtown for voice students, and I was also a piano accompanist for dance classes. I was in a small dance company. And then I also was working on my master's at Northwestern, and I was dancing in the dance company there.
Wow. So, yeah, Chicago is one of those places where everything kind of intercepts. So you were at Northwestern. How did you hear about osteopathic medicine there and then begin to apply to osteopathic school?
So I was actually at Loyola. So I had finished at Northwestern. I was out teaching and getting jobs, and I was actually making a living as a musician and a dancer, which is not easy to do. But yeah, you usually have your hands full with about 4 different jobs at the same time. But that's the lifestyle that you have. So I was doing that, and so I started taking classes for music therapy and dance therapy at Loyola University because they have a very good post-baccalaureate pre-professional health program. So it's for anybody who wants to go into a health field that did not have the basic science courses. So you basically take all your science courses in 1 year, or you spread them out in 2 years, and then you don't have to get another degree. So it was actually my biology teacher there. He pulled me aside. I think I was in his office asking him questions, and he said, you're a really good student. Have you ever thought about going to medical school instead of doing music therapy and dance therapy? He goes, I think you might feel limited doing music therapy and dance therapy, and I think you should go into medical school. So he was the one who planted the seed for me. I really wasn't thinking about it. And then they had the person who ran this pre-professional health program. He also introduced me about osteopathic medicine because he knew what my interests were and he knew a lot about it. I think there have been several people from that program that have applied to osteopathic medical schools because of that man. And I'm sorry, I can't remember his name.
That's okay. So this biology professor kind of sent you on the way or planted the seed. Did you apply to any other schools besides the Chicago school?
I was only applying to Illinois schools because I wanted to stay in state. So I actually only applied to Chicago College of Osteopathic Medicine. That was the only osteopathic school I applied to. And then I applied to University of Illinois and Rush and Loyola. And I got into University of Illinois and Chicago College of Osteopathic Medicine. But I really liked the philosophy of the osteopathic schools. So that was my number one choice. At the time, my mother was ill and I wanted to stay around the area.
So yeah, that's usually I hear a lot about like how geography plays a big role in some students' decision making. So can you tell me you're able to be close with your mom at the time, and then how was your experience at the Chicago College of Osteopathic Medicine?
I really loved my experience here. I think being a medical student was such a privilege, and I think my education was outstanding. They were also very supportive of me. I also liked my interview. I think my interview here was probably one of the friendliest interview processes I've had. So I felt very welcomed here. They did, of course, ask the question because this was back in the 1980s. So people would cock their head at me and go, well, you're a musician. Why do you want to become a physician? And they didn't quite understand the connection. So I would always have to explain myself with that. But actually, if you look at a career wheel, medicine is the most artistic of the sciences, and music is the most scientific of the arts. So they're right next to each other on a career wheel.
I've never heard of a career wheel. Is that kind of like a color wheel?
It's kind of like a color wheel. So when I saw it with my kids when they were going through high school, when they took their ACTs and they would ask them like what profession they wanted to go into, they would, ask them a series of questions and they would put them on this career wheel. And it was kind of divided into, people skills, technical skills, and it would put you and give you ideas of what jobs you may want to go into in your future.
That's kind of cool. I'll have to bring that out when my kids are deciding what they want to do in the world.
Yeah.
So you're at Midwestern, which I believe it wasn't Midwestern at the time. And did you participate in any extracurricular activities or research?
I did for the summer in between first year and second year. That's the 1 year that you have your summer off. I was a neuroanatomy research assistant and was able to do some neuroanatomy research that summer, which was a great experience. Again, the team was just very, very friendly. And the work was interesting. I had to sacrifice some mice, which I wasn't my favorite thing to do. But we did that, and then we actually did a surgery on the mice too. So I got some surgical skills. And then, we didn't get to finish the research because then the neuroanatomist actually left and went to teach at another school. But it was a good experience. I enjoyed it. And then I was also a teacher's assistant for anatomy my second year.
How did those two experiences influence you, during your clinical rotations and then when you decided what your specialty would be?
I was interested in neurology, so that was one of the reasons why I wanted to do the neurology research, to have that under my belt. And I still thought I was interested in doing neurology when I entered my clinical rotations. But then, I think the osteopathic schools really teach you very holistically and really teach you about the whole person. And so I really then started to go towards more of a primary care interest, because you can take care of the whole person and not just their nervous system. So I think just the overall teaching philosophy of the school really geared me towards primary care.
So were there any people that you met, instructors, peers, that while you were a student at Midwestern that you still remember and that have influenced you?
Well, one of them was Ken Nelson. Ken Nelson is just a great guy. He looks like a cowboy. He wears cowboy boots, but he was just so accessible and somewhat silly sometimes. He taught OMM. But he was just very accepting, gracious of all the students, and would always encourage you to do osteopathic medicine. So Ken has recently retired. I've kept in contact with him. He sponsored me for my fellow, because I'm a fellow of the ACOFP. So he was my sponsor.
Okay. Can you tell me about kind of how you become a fellow in your chosen practice?
So to become a fellow of the American College of Osteopathic Family Physicians, there's several requirements. One, I think, is you have to be out in practice. I think it's 6 years. You have to be a member of the ACOFP for 6 years and be going to their meetings. But then also you have to write a paper. You have to be active in your state or national society, and you have to look like you are doing something educational, whether you're on a journal board or whether you're actively teaching. And so those are the requirements, those are actually much more than a lot of other fellow requirements are.
So you mentioned like leadership at a national or a local level. Can you kind of go into what you have done for leadership, and then also, what students can kind of look for and why it's important to kind of take those active leadership roles?
Yeah, so when I was a resident, there was a physician here, Millicent T. Tamble. She was OB-GYN, and she invited me to become the resident representative of the Illinois Osteopathic Medical Society. And back then, you would go once a month and sit in a big room, and everybody would talk about advocacy and the yearly meetings that they would provide for the state. And so I did that as a resident, and that kind of opened my eyes to working at the state level. And then when I graduated, me and one of my fellow colleagues, Laura Rosh, who is now dean, can't remember where she's dean, but she's dean of one of the medical schools, we did the board review course for the state. And we did that for several years. We stopped because I think we both started having more children. So we stopped for a while. And then I got back into it. Laura had also gotten back into it, invited me to come back, because she was a past president of the Illinois Medical State Society. And so then she put me into the leadership. You kind of get into this leadership path. So you kind of go from secretary to treasurer to vice president to president-elect to president. And you do that for 1 year every year while you're also serving on committees. So by the time you become president, you are ready. You're very ready to be president. So I did that with the Illinois Osteopathic Medical Society, and I was president, I believe, in 2016, 17. So I did that. And then I also became active on the ACOFP's program committee because I run the conferences for my residency program. So they sought me out and said, would you be interested in helping us run programs for the national level? And I said, absolutely. So then in 2017, I think I was co-chair. In 2018, I was chair of the ACOFP program committee and organized the whole program for the spring meeting.
So you're currently a family practice residency director, but looking back when you were still at CCOM, and how did you finally decide on your specialty? And then what was your experience with the process of getting into residency?
Well, that was a very different time getting into residencies. I'll just say that. I was originally interested in my top two choices was either to go into neurology, and that's why I did the neurology research. My other thought was that I wanted to go into physical medicine and rehabilitation, which again is a very popular residency program for DOs to go into. A matter of fact, last I heard about, we represent 9%, maybe 10% now of the United States physicians, and about 50% of PM&R doctors are DOs. So it's a very popular DO specialty. So those were my two, and I did rotations in both. And then I had just a wonderful rotation at CCOM with a family physician who pretty much let me do just about everything. She let me really run the patient care and management. And after that, I was hooked, and I thought, I really want to go into family medicine. At the time, what you did was you just I walked into the family medicine program director's office and said, I would like to go into family medicine. And he's like, sure, we'll sign you up. There was no match. And so it was between that and it was between neurology. So I actually applied to both. I got the neurology position, which they only accepted one. So I started out with neurology. I was really torn. There was a lot of pressure to specialize back then. So I did neurology for 1 year. And after a half a year, I went up to my program director and I said, this is not for me. I mean, it's very interesting, but I really, really want to do family medicine. And so I went back to the program director, kind of with my tail between my legs, and said, I think I want to do family medicine. And he said to me, didn't I tell you so? Because when I told him I was going to go into neurology, he said, I'll see you in 6 months. He goes, you're a family doctor, and I know you are, and you'll be back. He goes, so I'm going to keep this position open for you. And he did, and he was right.
We've spoken to many physicians on their journey in osteopathic medicine, and I hear over and over again how much, mentors are important in kind of making or breaking a decision in what specialty you go into. How does a student go out seeking mentorship?
Yeah, that's a good question. Mentorship, I think, it's difficult to find a good mentor. Sometimes your mentor is one person. Sometimes your mentor is several people that have given you advice just in certain areas. And so when I think back to when I went into family medicine, I don't think there was one single mentor that I had. There was probably a handful. And they were men, they were women, but there wasn't a single one. There was also less women in medicine at that time. There wasn't as many mentors for me to seek out.
So you're in your residency. You transitioned from your neurology residency. Can you share some of your experiences during residency?
Oh, with patient care or just for getting through residency? I think one of the things is you have to, the program director we had at that time was Dr. John Karat, and he was an angel in disguise. So I would highly recommend for students to find a residency program where the residency director is supportive and believes in you, because that was just really important at the time for me, is to have somebody who believed in me and thought that I was competent in what I was doing. So he was great. You want to learn as much as you can in residency programs. And our residency program was in Hyde Park. that we had a high volume. And just to think about the volume of patient care we saw there, we would see up to 50 patients a day in the clinic, so 25 per half day. And there's no way anybody can do that now anymore. But that's what we did. So with residency, I think the important part for family medicine was to see and experience as much as possible because it's such a broad field.
Yes, from, the womb till the outer edges. So, what do you think was your proudest moment during your education as a DO?
Graduating? That's a good question. I think it was probably just trying to find a balance and trying to find meaning in what I was doing, which I did. I found a lot of meaning in what I was doing and really felt that every day I was coming to work and making a difference in people's lives and taking care of people. And again, this was in Hyde Park where the patient population there was great. They were very appreciative of your care, but they were a very complex, socially underserved area. But I found it really rewarding to take care of those. So I would say that was the highlight.
So you mentioned, I guess, kind of a tenet of osteopathic medicine, like finding balance and ease. Have you found it yet, or are you still trying to get there as well?
I'm a very selfish person. So I do find my balance because I think I demand it upon myself to find balance. I've always really enjoyed hobbies. I really enjoy sleep. I think it's fantastic and it's underrated. But, you learn how to say no and you learn how to kind of carve out your career. You can't really do it as much as a student or a resident, but definitely when you get out, you can carve your career the way you want it, and it's okay to say no, or it's okay to say, hey, I really have an interest and a drive for this. I want to do more of this. So yeah, you have to have your own voice and you'll have other people recommend other things to you or you'll see what other people are doing, but you really have to carve it out for yourself and be brave to do that.
Well, thank you for saying yes to our podcast. So you survived, maybe thrived your residency. How was it looking for your first job?
Oh, well, this was my situation, my scenario when I was finishing up residency. I had three small children. I had two children during medical school, and I had one child during residency. So my goal was to find someplace close to home because I wanted to be where if I needed to run home, I could. So I just looked around at all the hospitals that were within a 10-mile radius of me and I interviewed. And two of them had residency programs. I was very interested in teaching. I had taught my last year of residency, I had taught OMM and Introduction to Clinical Medicine. And I wanted to continue teaching. And I had taught piano before. So I really enjoyed teaching. So the main two programs I looked at were teaching programs, and they both offered me positions within 48 hours. So one of the perks of going into family medicine is you can find a job probably within an hour radius of your home easily.
So would you, if you had, if you didn't have I wouldn't say, family life is a constraint, but would you have chosen maybe a different specialty? Or do you think, family medicine was it chose you, you're done? Or do you think if you could do it all over again, maybe you'd choose something else?
No, I think family medicine was definitely that is me. That is what I was destined here to do. I'm glad, though, that I tried my 1 year of neurology residency because, again, at the time, there was a lot of pressure to specialize. So I tried it. And then I had that opportunity to try it. And then I didn't like it. I mean, I liked it, but it wasn't really for me. I caught myself going to see patients after I had done my consult just to see how they were doing. I remember I was criticized by my residency program director. He said, "You're doing too much. You don't need to do all of that. You're a neurology resident." So yeah. So I really thought, I'd rather see the whole person, and I missed that. So this was absolutely the best choice for me, and I wouldn't go back on it in a second.
So you're a fellow in family medicine as well as osteopathic practice. Can you just tell, some of the students as they're, either thinking of osteopathic school or are already, in their OMM lab, their osteopathic manipulative medicine lab. Can you just share with how you add OMT to your family practice?
Yeah, sure. I think of it all the time. There's so many musculoskeletal issues out there that people are dealing with that I think the main thing to tell students is that you just got to, again, plant a seed and think about it all the time. And you don't have to do a lot of OMM with each patient. Sometimes it's just one or two techniques. If I see a prenatal patient, I most of the time they come in, I do a little bit of lumbar soft tissue on them just because I know that their lumbar area is stressed right now with the pregnancy. And I think they're very appreciative of that. So I think it's just, you just got to think about it all the time. And it's amazing and patients love it. And it's, again, the art of touch that a lot of patients feel that they don't get from their physicians.
With, you're talking about, that prenatal patient. What are some other patients that you might see that OMT is helpful with?
Like fall is coming and sinuses are getting congested. So sinus congestion is a wonderful one to do OMT on. And not only do I do the OMT for the patient right then and there, but I also teach them. I teach them their pressure points and how they can do it at home so that they can give themselves good self-relief at home. Another one is headaches. The other day I had somebody come in and she was constipated and I taught her how to viscerally massage her abdomen to help her with her, her constipation. But then I also told her to go get herself some prune juice too. So, you want everything to help you out.
Right. So you mentioned headaches, and I think you've given some presentations at conferences on headaches. Is that correct?
Yes.
Can you just tell, because I know that like one of the first things that you learn is, the occipital release in like an OMM lab. Can you just tell us some things about how OMT can help alleviate headaches, which so many people have?
Yeah. So the thought is that, you carry extra tension in your neck and then that kind of goes up to your skull or your cranium. And then you get muscle tension in your top of your head. And it feels like this horrible squeezing band that's going to squeeze your brain out of your head. So a lot of times you need to look at neck alignment. But besides for looking at neck alignment, I also like to look at just the long muscles that go from your cervical spine down through your thoracic spine, because a lot of times those are the ones that are causing the issues. So I work on the thoracic area as well as the cervical area, as well as the cranium for headaches.
So, some headaches for medical students are loans and how the heck they're going to pay for medical school. And I know that, you went to a state school and then you were, as they say in the 80s, like a 9 to 5 working girl. But how did you finance your medical education? And then how did you work on paying it off?
Yeah, so I can tell you that back then our tuition was $10,000 to $12,000 a year. Yeah, that's really enlightening, isn't it? So that's what it was. And so what I did for I actually worked my first 2 years of medical school while I was going to medical school. So what I did was I took all of my favorite piano students and I lined them up on Saturday. And I went in to the music studio and I taught for 8 hours on Saturday. And I was able to make $200 in one day doing that. And so at that time, that was $800 cash a month. It was enough for me to pay kind of like my basic cost of living. I was living with my husband at the time, so that was enough for us to we shared, finances. So I was able to pay my half of the bills, and then I just took out loans for my tuition.
After you were in medical school, you did the advice that like keeping your loans as minimal as possible. How did you start? Like, what was kind of your plan in paying back your loans?
I'm very methodical, so I did the 10-year plan, which is what the bank recommended, and I just paid it back every single month. I did not pay any more. I did not pay any less. I did not miss a payment. And again, my payment, I still remember, was $435 a month, which is not bad at all compared to some of the nightmares that I hear that students have now. But I also hear of some students that are living with their parents and things like that. And I think that's brilliant, so you want to minimize your costs however you can.
You also have some very expensive beings in your life, children. What are some advice for, students that are thinking about becoming parents, they're already parents, like how do you manage everything?
One of the things I thought was a great educational value for me was to have a child during medical school. And I don't think too many doctors would say that, but I will say that. And I think the reason why is because it really made me think about, what do I want to do in my life? And now I have to support somebody, and be a role model for this person. But how do I want my time to be spent? Because if you have children and a family, you need to have time with them. You need to spend time with them. And so I think it really helped me think through and get some balance to my life before I graduated, having two children before I graduated.
You mentioned that you like sleep. Did you get any sleep then?
there were years there were years I didn't get much sleep. My first child she was great. She slept through the night at 3 weeks. I came back. I said, oh, this is easy. I can do this. So I did it again. And my second child did not sleep through the night for 6 months. He was so colicky. And I remember going to call thinking, I think I actually got more sleep on call than I did at home some nights. So that was a rough 6 months. So yeah, there's good years and bad years for sleep.
Yeah. So I think we're sort of touching that third rail of work-life balance. Can you just talk to us about some of your hobbies so you can maximize sleep, maximize, patient time, and then maximize self-time?
Yeah. So, one of the things I did when I got out of residency was, again, I looked for jobs close to the radius, within 10 minutes of driving distance to my home. And I would highly recommend that for everyone because, live close to where you work. It makes you a greener human being, but it also saves you a lot of time. So I was going to school, commuting 45 minutes back and forth. I mean, I was saving myself about 10 hours a week by working close to home. So I just thought that's a great time saver right then. And then hobbies, I like hobbies that you can do at home or away. I'm a big yoga person, so I do a lot of yoga. I'm certified in it. I teach it at the hospital. But you can do yoga anywhere. So you can do it at any time and you can fit it into your schedule. And exactly when you feel like you don't have time to do it is exactly when you should do it. So yeah, so I do that. I also take a dance class now and then. I love to do long walks. And so again, walking you can do anytime, any place, and musical instruments you can play in your home.
Yeah. Well, those are all lovely even and therapeutic hobbies as well. Can you tell a little bit about how yoga? I know that there are some stretches that osteopathic physicians can teach their patients so they can take that home with them. Can you just talk about how you also incorporate maybe some of your yoga practice into your medical practice?
Yeah, absolutely. So if I have somebody come in with back pain and they come in and I assess their back pain, I do some osteopathic manipulation on them, and then I give them exercises. Now I can give them regular exercises, but I can also give them yoga poses. And some of the ones that I love to give are called restorative yoga poses. Because I think everybody thinks of yoga, they think of this, thin woman that gets herself into a pretzel pose. But that's not it at all. People who have back pain can't do that. So restorative poses are really like positions of ease, where you get somebody positioned laying down in a pose that relieves their back pain. So there's some classic yoga restorative poses. We also have poses in osteopathic manipulation, like the constant rest position. And you give patients these positions, and if you tell them to do all these exercises, they don't tend to want to do those at first because they have a lot of pain, but they will do the restorative yoga poses and it gets their back calmed down. And then the next time they come in, you've kind of jarred that door or planted that seed, and that they're a little bit more willing to do more active exercises the next time you see them.
So you're a musician, a dancer, a yoga teacher, taking on leadership roles in osteopathic medicine. So are there any things that you do to give back to the community?
So my yoga class at the hospital is a free yoga class. So I do that to give back to the community. Everybody is welcome to come. That's probably the main thing I do now. I have done different things in the past. I'm currently the medical director of Oak Leiden, this is one of my fun things to do. Oak Leiden is a group home for developmental disabilities for adults. And so I go over there and I do physicals for them every month and take care of them. So I enjoy doing that.
Can you tell us a little bit about this community center? It's been around for 60 years, I think.
Oak Leiden?
Yes.
Yeah, it's been around for a long time. So what it does is it offers, I think we have nine or 10 group homes right now. And so they give a place for people to live. They kind of group them into intellectual ability, and then they will try to find them jobs. And our goal is to keep them as healthy as they can be. Again, they're a very underserved patient population. So our goal is to get them access to care so that they can live a long and healthy life.
So I think you gave some kind of talk about treating people with special needs. How is it different when you're dealing with people with atypical neuro abilities as well as developmental abilities? How do you communicate and help them understand their care and get better?
Yeah, that's always challenging. So most of the time what you need for them to have an advocate with them or a relative with them to help you with their care. The other thing to do too is realize that a lot of times taking care of these patients is like taking care of a small child, and that they can't really articulate for you what their concerns are. So you wind up sometimes you wind up testing them a bit more because you just need to collect some more data because the history a lot of times is not there. But you have to really listen carefully to the family members because they know them intimately and they know when something's not right.
How do students and then how do you learn to listen better to patients?
That is a great question. I guess I used to always say to people, listen more, speak less. You have to pick your words carefully and accurately on how you're going to ask a question to somebody. And then it's also the ability to, when they answer, to try to kind of lead them down a path when you think, they're starting to give you the idea of what's going on, but you kind of have to help them find the right words or find the right description. Sometimes you have to hand them descriptions. It's like, does it feel this way or that way? But yeah, you want to really listen. And I think the longer you do the profession, the better your listening skills get.
So we've got a little bit of time left. We have pre-med students as well as, students right now, and then as some residents as well, kind of exploring their next steps. And I noticed you didn't mention it with your community service, but there's many different ways to give back to the community with medicine. Can you talk to us about your time with the Indian Health Service?
Yeah, that was fun. So I went to the Indian Health Service and I just told them, just place me someplace where you're needed. So they placed me in a Indian reservation in Sessaton, South Dakota. And it was a very small clinic. I think we had might have been a 4-bed hospital. They had one cardiac monitor, so you would just kind of unplug it and bring it around to whoever needed it. Wasn't continuous. When you do Indian Health Service, they put you up in a house. So I stayed it was literally called the Little House on the Prairie, and it was on a prairie. But the learning experience there was incredible. There was one older physician who was there, and he kind of mentored us. There was 2 younger physicians, me and another guy, and he mentored us and helped us out. It was hard to build the trust because you're coming in as an outsider to the Indian reservation, and so a lot of the patients didn't trust you, and then you were only there for a short period of time. So you really had to learn some of the cultural norms. Like one of the cultural norm I learned from them that was really difficult for me because I tend to be somebody who kind of leans forward and looks in people's faces was for the Indian culture, that was a big mistake. They really don't like you to look them in the eye. So I had to be taught to kind of look elsewhere while I was asking them personal questions, and then they would answer me better. So sometimes making eye contact is not always the best thing in different cultures. So, yeah, so my experience there was very good. I went during tick season and I learned more about ticks than I ever want to know. And I remember my husband at the time said, "Yeah, we've never seen ticks being from Illinois. I wonder what they look like." And he turned around and there was a tick right on his cheek. So I learned how to take off my first tick right then.
Now that you know how to use OMT to treat Lyme disease as well. So
Yes, that's right.
it's a little cheesy, but it's my favorite question. Can you tell us one thing about you that has made you successful? Like, what is your superpower?
I think my superpower is that I like schedules, but I don't know if that's it. I think it's because I am an eternal optimist. I really try to see the good side of people and the good side of life. I think in the last 6 months, it's been challenging with the pandemic and just the political upheaval going on. But I really try to, yeah, I try to look at the good things and I try to help people out as much as I can. I mean, in the office and outside of the office, because everybody needs help.
So thank you so much for spending your lunch hour with us. I'd just like to close with, what was the best piece of advice that you got on your osteopathic journey and that you think that it would be of value to pass on to other individuals that are going on this osteopathic medical journey?
I would say the best advice I got was to keep up your osteopathic manipulation skills. Because a lot of people leave school and they don't use them anymore. So it's a wonderful treatment modality. It's wonderful for pain. I've been able to get some patients off of opioid medication by having them come in for regular treatments. So use your OMT.
Very good. Well, thank you so much for your time. And then I happen to be blessed, so I look forward to seeing you in class.
All right. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks so much.
This concludes our episode of Do or Do Not. Send all inquiries, comments, suggestions, and even let us know if there is someone you want us to interview to doordonotpodcast@gmail.com. Don't forget to like us on Facebook at Do or Do Not Podcast for updates. If you enjoyed our podcast, please share it with your classmates and administration. We have plenty of more interviews lined up, and we're excited to share them with you. This is Tian Yu Shea. Thank you guys so much for listening to Do or Do Not.